Welcome to Tinfoil Bonnet. Today we will look at an insider's perspective on child negligence within group homes and also within foster care and CPS. Now I will give you a quick introduction. The purpose of this presentation is to expose the negligent practices within child services and group homes. What I really want to do is increase the understanding and compassion for these kids that are placed in these institutions. The presentation outline will look like this. We will first go into the background info and status of child welfare, my personal experiences working as a behavioral health technician. Due to the sensitive nature of the content in the presentation, I will remain anonymous. We will look at my job responsibilities, characteristics of the clients, diagnoses, and medications the clients were put on. We will then look at the negligent behavior towards children while in the system and look at some testimonies from children and social workers that I found quite interesting available online. So now we'll look at some statistics and background information on child welfare. What I want to just say first is it's really important that we give a voice to these children that are in the system because they don't have one, okay? And we need to demand justice for them, and we need to come clean about what's happening in these institutions. Children, they become completely institutionalized. So they come in as a young age and stay until they age out as 18 typically. And they are left with no real skills, no real life skills on how to find a job, how to cook, how to work in a group, how to really articulate needs. They're not afforded any of these while they're in the system, any of these skills. Some statistics. Between 1991 and 2003, the coroner's office found that 660 children died while in LA County's foster care system. This is an insane amount of children that died while in government care, essentially. Some more statistics that were provided by Arrow Child and Family Ministries. The link is provided below. 40 to 50% of children in foster care or government care will never complete high school, okay? 66% of them will be homeless, go to jail, or die within 1 year of leaving the foster care system at 18. And 80% of the prison population was once in foster care. So think of that. We are really making prisoners while they are in government child care. Also, just another example of the breaking down of the nuclear family that's happening now. Girls in foster care are 600% more likely than the general population to become pregnant before the age of 21. Just to continue with some more statistics, 1,640 children who were referred to CPS died in 2012 as a result of neglect from current caregivers or parents. So CPS was aware of all of these children. They were either placed into foster care, government care, or with their biological parents, and they died. So, you know, the media propagates mass hysteria over the children that have been dying in these shootings, but will remain silent on the average 1,700 children that die every year to neglect and abuse. And if this were all to be really about the lives of children, then the neglectful government treatment of children, the victims of human trafficking, and the victims of parent neglect, this would be the real focal point in the news. So now that we looked at the background information with child welfare, I would like to go into my personal experiences when I worked as a behavioral health technician in a level 3 group home. Level 3 group homes, they are for children coming from mental institutions or juvie, essentially. It comprised of only adolescent children aged 12 to 17. Once they're 18, they aged out and were kind of left to fend for themselves. There was a minimum of 2 staff members on each shift for 8 to 10 girls. Okay, so each staff member should have only 4 girls with them. And it was also a 24-hour residential group home for girls, so they were there all day, all night. Next, what you will see is a video discussing CPS failing to investigate abuse complaints in group homes and treatment centers in Arizona.
Well, a new report finds that Child Protective Services is missing deadlines to investigate complaints of abuse in group homes and in treatment centers. An audit found that CPS investigators failed to look into those complaints on time, placing kids at risk of even further abuse. The audit also found that CPS allowed treatment center employees with complaints of child abuse against them to get new jobs in group homes where they have committed even more abuse. Since 2007, the Office of the Auditor General found that CPS completed its investigations on time in only 4 of the 147 cases.
So now I'd like to go back to what my responsibilities look like as a behavioral health technician. We were to provide care and safety to all the adolescents placed in the group home. We were responsible for facilitating therapeutic and educational groups. We were also responsible for the distribution and documentation of clients' medication, which was a very intense procedure that we had to do every day, which involved counting all of the pills, consequencing the girls if they did not take their medication, and documenting everything that was happening during that time. Also, we were to complete progress notes. Because this was a level 3 group home, we had to have very detailed progress notes, so maybe 8 to 10 paragraphs. So we had to have 8 interactions per girl each day that we were documenting on. We were also responsible for measuring and assessing clients' behavioral functioning, and we would advocate for the child, acting as custodial guardians. So we would act as the guardian in court. Sometimes we would also provide crisis intervention. What I would also like to highlight is that we were paid, I believe, $10 an hour, and the requirement was to have your bachelor's in psychology or sociology. That's just some more background on that. Next, we will go on to the presenting issues and the typical behaviors of the clients that were at the group home. So what the characteristics typically looked at were a lot of self-harm, cutting, suicide ideation, suicide attempts. Girls were often hoarding urine and soiled sheets. This is done kind of for abused children. It's a form of protection for themselves, because who would want to go into a wet bed or a room smelling like urine? It's a very interesting sign that comes, or symptom that comes from a lot of abuse at a young age. Lots of prostitution was happening, lots of hygiene issues, if you could imagine, verbal outbursts, lots of threats. Some were they had disassociation from the lower body, so they couldn't control their bowels. So also with abuse victims, they disassociate from their lower half. They just they don't feel down there anymore. Again, lots of threatening staff and others. We can go into some of those stories. Lots of violent physical altercations that some of them had, very aggressive. Lots of sexually acting out as well. So now that we looked at the behaviors the clients had, here are the diagnoses and disorders they had. Now, so you can prescribe a SSRI based off of this criteria, okay? Especially depression and bipolar. And we'll go more into this later, but the more diagnoses you have, the more money that child makes for the state, essentially. Okay, so very common, a lot of them had PTSD. I would almost say 90% of them had this. ADHD, depression, again, almost all of them. Bipolar disorder, very common. We're on the autistic spectrum. You should not diagnose a child like this, but it would still be in their charts that they were presenting borderline personality disorder or other antisocial personality disorders, which was not so common, but we did have a few. Another interesting disorder that would present within the girls was RAD, which is reactive attachment disorder. Now, this is a condition found in children who were neglected as a child, as an infant almost, and never really form emotional attachments, healthy emotional attachments with their primary caregivers. And this happens before the age of 5. What these clients look like, they were very detached. They were unresponsive or resistant to comforting. They didn't want you, they wanted no pity parties. They did not want you to say it's going to be better. They really didn't want you to console them at all. Also, they would hold back emotions. Maybe they really did, of course, in the end, want to be consoled, but they could not at that point. Also, they were very withdrawn, mixture approach, very avoidance. These girls would be fascinating. You would think that you were really getting somewhere with them or getting a rapport with them, and then they would just turn on you. They really had no attachments to people. It was very easy for them to let people just slip out of their lives. So just to continue with the diagnoses and disorders, this disorder I wanted to really put emphasis on, because just look at the criteria for this disorder. Okay, so this is called oppositional defiant disorder, and it refers to a reoccurring pattern of negative, defiant, disobedient, and hostile behavior toward authority figures lasting 6 months. Okay, to be diagnosed with this, you have to have 4 or more of the following symptoms. Right. Often loses temper, argues with adults, actively defies or refuses to comply with adults' requests or rules, deliberately annoys people, blames others for his or her mistakes or misbehavior, is touchy or easily annoyed by others, is often angry and resentful, is often spiteful and vindictive. Are you kidding me? This criteria is a normal person put in a system who is a child that has been abused and neglected all of their life. Of course, they're going to present with losing temper and arguing with adults and having no faith in authority when all it has done is let them down. And once you have this in your charts, you again are making more money for the state if you have ODD. Okay, if this is in your chart, if this is a diagnosis of yours. Oppositional defiant disorder. This is a joke. This is any child that is put in such awful circumstances will present like this. Another one is also conduct disorder. This is more serious behavior and aggression towards people or animals. This is a very more serious diagnosis. Destruction of property, lying, stealing, skipping school. They are associated with delinquency. Children exhibiting these behaviors should receive a comprehensive evaluation. I would agree with that. But with oppositional defiant disorder, I sympathize with people who had this in their charts. So next we'll go on to medications. Here are some common medications that our clients were on. So your 15-year-old here would be on something like this: lithium, Ritalin, Hyadol was given. This was more given in level 4 group homes, mental institutions, or children's hospitals. It's also known as the booty shot. It sedates hysterical kids. Some other typical medications were a lot of SSRIs, which are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, such as risperidone, Zexapra, and Lexapro, which are commonly used to treat schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and different autistic disorders. Here are some stories of what happened while at the group home and what happened to the girls. I just want to first say, the staff that I worked with really genuinely cared about these girls, and we did the best we could with what we had to take care of them, all right? But we were understaffed and underqualified. One time, there were 2 new staff members alone on shift, and 7 of the girls ran away from the group home. We were only able to get 4 back, I believe, and then 3 were completely gone, literally never to be heard of again. Actually, one we did hear of later on when I was working there. They did spot her, and she was put in another facility. But then that's 2 that were completely just, we did not see them again. One of the girls who went AWOL that night actually was raped. And when she came back to the group home, what's really hard for some people to understand is that when you are abused or traumatized, you are not going to present like normal children who have been abused and traumatized. They are used to it. So when this one client was saying that she had been raped, she was very nonchalant and casual about it, to a point where we were not sure if we really believed her. And we did take her to the gynecologist, and she was, yes, in fact, raped. And that still wears hard on my heart, but I was able to provide support to her the best I could. But what upsets me the most about this is nothing was done to find this rapist. We did all the appropriate documentation, notified the police, everything. No one located them. Definitely just because the girl was in a group home and had a past of prostitution, I believe. And it was not taken seriously, although the doctors confirmed it, everything. We even later on in the year saw her rapist, which was a homeless man, called the police again. Nothing was done, nothing followed up from that, nothing. Another client came in after living with her mother, who really loved her, but was homeless, and then the girl was raped in a homeless shelter. And then she was placed in this group home kind of for respite, and it was really unfair. She was not like the other girls, presenting like they were, yet placed in a facility with people on probation, violent girls that were not like her. And I felt pity for her. Another girl too, she came from juvie to our group home for molesting children because she was molested. She actually had younger siblings not involved in that. She really adored them, and they were in foster care. What a sad story is that I met the foster care parents of her siblings, and they were this elderly couple who were caring, loving people who were expressing their concern to me of the lack of CPS involvement. They were not ever checking in. They would do a call once a month maybe, but would not come by and see how the children were. And the foster care parents were very worried because they were going to retire soon and move, and they didn't want those children to get placed in a facility that's poor, and they know firsthand that CPS does not check on them. Another girl too she had RAD. Her mother was murdered literally down the street by the same abuser that abused her. This was very difficult. It's just, this is all going on all around us, and people just don't see it. This other girl I had, she was an interesting case. She was lower functioning. She came in, I think, actually when she was 13, after she tried to slit the throat of her sibling. She was tied up and raped for 30 days. Now that I look back at this and I'm more awake, I would say that she may have had she was a satanic ritual abuse victim, perhaps. Due to the things she was saying, I now believe that for the ritual practice of that she was tied up for 30 days is fascinating. Some negligence on our part. So we knew that her attacker possibly or had HIV. She was bounced around in some group homes, and she was not getting the results back from her HIV test. And you kind of have to, you can't avoid dealing with these girls' bodily functions when they're at the group home. So this was very scary for some staff members. And I had to really make a push to get this results back. And luckily I had a manager that just was adoring and really cared about the girls. And we finally got those results back, and she was fine, actually. was a very good day. She used to, people believe she was presenting with schizophrenia, although that doesn't happen until the 20s, typically, when that presents. But she would draw, you know, demon slit eyes and say she was seeing people, would have hallucinations. Then we tried to get her to say that she wasn't seeing them, she was just thinking of the abuse that happened. She had dissociation from her lower body, like many of the other girls. We used code words to help her cope with sightings and things like that. We got her to actually have a successful discharge, and I really pray and hope and send her good vibes that she's doing good. She was near and dear. These girls I really cared about. Here we will then continue on with some common group home treatment goals and look at some testimonies. Treatment goals included the goal to reduce negative attention seeking and to use positive attention seeking to improve emotional boundaries and to decrease false reporting. Also, they were to decrease aggressive behavior and manipulation. They were to have proper anger management and develop positive methods to resolve conflicts, so build up coping skills, such as, you know, going for a walk or journaling. To promote healthy hygiene, positive self-esteem. We would do like positive words of affirmation, have them say positive things about themselves every day. Positive assertion of control, displaying appropriate boundaries with others, reducing self-harm, that was a common one, a lot of suicide ideation, and also to decrease false reporting. False reporting would be, for example, faking a hallucination, faking a seizure, faking an injury, things like that. These were common goals that they had, and that also gives you a little insight on issues that they had as well. Next, we will go on to a girl who will describe her experiences in a group home.
Los Angeles County's foster care system is known to be one of the most violent and dangerous in the nation. Between 1991 and 2003, the coroner's office found that 660 children died while in LA County's foster care, in which 160 of them were ruled homicides. Not too long ago, there was a 2-year investigation held by the Daily News. They found that LA County's foster children are 10 times more likely to die from abuse or neglect than anywhere else in the country. Mr. David Sanders, DCFS director, has previously stated, more kids are hurt in our system than in other systems. That helps explain why approximately 800 LA County foster children are on the run as we speak on any given day. Rather than using the unstatistical common excuse kids don't want to follow rules, DCFS should conduct an investigation to determine the reason the kids are running away. When one or more kids are running away or making allegations on a particular home, that should be a clear clue something is going on. Kids are being placed in uncomfortable and unsafe situations. The only people who knows what goes on in these homes are the children behind shut doors living with these strangers. The majority of people taking in foster children do it as a source of income, often their only source of income, which is unacceptable. But the fact is clear that there are not enough foster homes. And because of this, many teens end up in group homes. In group homes, you have an excessive amount of kids with many different backgrounds and personalities, and children's social workers are placing kids with no criminal record with kids released from juvenile hall, on probation, or off the streets from prostitution. Kids are vulnerable and easily swayed. Children's social workers should be held responsible for endangering the lives of these children. I witnessed a foster child being stabbed with a steak fork and a knife in one of the group homes my CSW placed me in. Mr. Antonovich, from what I've heard and researched on you, you seem to agree that kids need safety, stability, love, and family. I have personally been shipped around like a suitcase with legs and used as cash profit. The system's promise for permanency has not delivered. So I went and knocked on 239 doors to find someone to adopt me into their lives, and the Santa Clarita Sheriffs can verify that with you. I took the initiative to find a suitable home for myself, a safe one, because it became clear my social worker would not. DCFS saved me by taking me away from my biological parents' abuse. If they hadn't, I'd probably be dead, or sleeping in duck ponds, or on your driveway. Yet DCFS has placed me with perverts, child molesters, careless foster parents who apparently think it's okay to lock us kids out, lock up the food, refuse to take me to the doctors, a foster parent who barely spoke the same language, and the list goes on, believe me, it does. When I report these things to my CSW, she often ignores it. I couldn't get help from Mr. Sanders because he wouldn't speak to me, yet he speaks to the press. I've gone to many individuals from the department for help, yet I got none, and that's why I'm here. For help! I go to school, I don't do drugs, I have no criminal record, I work, I have goals such as being future DCFS director. I want to be in a safe home and be loved and cared about like every other kid. I need to be placed in a suitable home. I need a different social worker from a different location, and for one of you to personally make sure this all happens. I'm not asking you for a pony, I'm asking for a better life. I don't deserve where I'm at. Today you need to place me in a suitable home or take me home with you. It's a bit exhausting living as a 16-year-old runaway. And also, can I just mention one more thing?
Sure.
There's also, if you can talk to Miss Ramey at Highland High School about another situation, about a girl who's in a tough situation. I don't know about it because it's confidential, but if you could talk to her, she's at Highland High School. It's basically the fault of DCFS. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Rusty's going to talk to you over in the corner, lady right there.
So what that young lady was able to beautifully articulate was the extreme unsafe environment that a group home is sometimes, as well as other foster care homes. Big thanks to Sheila Allen for her putting out those videos on YouTube. Definitely check those out. Now, to just look at the negligent and borderline illegal practices that I saw was definitely the continuous practice of diagnosing children under the age of 18. Now, we were not making these diagnoses, but they were still in their charts. And you shouldn't diagnose a child with these adult personality disorders until their brain is done forming. And they walk around with these intense diagnoses in their charts. And also, the diagnoses do make more money for the facilities. So the more diagnoses a child has, the more money they receive. Also, the girls were on very heavy medications such as lithium. And when you're bounced around different group homes or, taken from a home, a lot of times the girls wouldn't have their meds with them. Also, if they were to run away for a couple of days or something like that and they didn't have their meds, they could have a psychotic break because of the inconsistent medication administration that they had going on. Also, you should not, as a staff member, I believe the law was, you should not have over 5 children with one single staff member at one time. And there were many situations where something would happen with one child and then you would end up with 8 children alone while one staff member goes and deals with another one. And this is, as much as we would try, it's just impossible to give the girls the attention they needed, these lower functioning and special needs kids, all of the attention they need. 8 children at once, it was very difficult to really do that. You had to really just rely on yourself. Also, we were facilitating anger management groups, which you should be a therapist to have this. We had our bachelor degrees at the time. I mean, come on. And then we would, we were taught to do crisis intervention, of course, to some degree. But when it becomes to, life-threatening, like girls hanging out of windows, stabbings or what have you, we don't have the education and training to really treat people with the trauma too that happens after one of these situations. We definitely did our best and we tried to educate ourselves, but again, this is because we cared and because my manager cared. She really tried to get us to cope with these situations and do it as well as we could, but it was obvious that we were underqualified, understaffed, under-equipped, and it was always, they had these standards too that we were forced to lie sometimes because they were just impossible to uphold some of the standards that they had. Some other negligent practices I would want to go into is that the children would face repercussions for denying meds, and they would always ask to be off them. And all we could do is advocate, when we would meet with the treatment team that they wanted to start weaning off some of the meds, and then you would have to get it approved by the CPS worker and psychiatrist and therapist. These kids had teams that needed to be approved for them to do anything with getting off of any of these drugs. And I mean, they were just complete zombies walking around, these 13-year-olds just completely over-medicated. Also, workers, we would work sometimes over 72 hours a week, and we would get in more trouble about the pay. And what would happen is, something would go wrong in the group home, and you had to stay with the children until it was safe again, or you were stuck in the hospital with them for 4 extra hours. So these hours would really rack up, and then you'd have to chart, and charting sometimes took 2.5 hours because you would also need to call the treatment teams if an incident had happened. Also there was always police involvement. We called the police on these children all the time, and they would get such rap sheets, and they didn't know their rights. And I remember there was this one girl who I was almost proud of because she asked for a lawyer, and then she just said, just kidding, but and we were also told not to inform them of their rights, which is scary. Also, the PRNs and RNs, sometimes our managers would try to hire extra staff. Definitely if such a high staff turnover rate, sometimes you would only have one on shift, and then you would have to have 2 RNs come in. And they would be working in normal group homes and just didn't have training or background information and would trigger clients or what have you. Or you just didn't know they were just not safe people because we didn't know them. They were also placed into dangerous homes or foster care homes with multiple children. I remember this one woman asked to pick up one girl from our group home, and she already had 5 girls. And I believe she was just soaking up money. Our girl came back a month later because she got in a fight. Yes, and also, again, they don't check on these kids. And when they put in a complaint, it's not really taken too seriously, which is a pity. Also, girls would be discharged. You go home for one day, and the next day 4 girls are gone because there was an incident that happened the day before, or something happened, and you just never really hear of them again. They're just gone. Also, girls would get tricked by their case managers. We hated this. We did not approve of this. Sometimes they would just take them from school without their clothes, without their belongings, and just move them into another facility without any warning. Also, social workers would pick up a client, by school line, telling them that they were going home, and then they would realize that they're going to a complete different county. Or we would get a girl all of a sudden at our home with none of her belongings, no clothing, and just a couple of old meds. It was sad. Also, sometimes a lot of the girls, when they were taken, if they what happens here, so they get in a big fight and they get discharged, a negative discharge from our group home for whichever reason, and then their CPS office picks them up, and then due to the lack of facilities, the kids would sleep in the offices of the CPS officers. And, we're just completely under-equipped to handle the amount of children that are in the system, too.
Hi, my name is Dina Petruzzi, and I'm a supervising children's social worker at the Belvedere office. I began with DCFS as a trainee 19 years ago, and I've seen over the years dozens of new social workers leave the department. As we all know, not only is it demoralizing and a waste of resources, it results in higher caseloads for those left behind, which negatively impacts the community that we serve. And in response to this need for staffing, hundreds of new social workers were hired. And the single most important factor when they were surveyed contributing to their stress was lack of adequate training and the absence of a structured and strong peer support system. Independently developed office-based mentoring has been successful due to the already skilled CSWs and CSWs doing the work already. But these practices were informal. They were dependent on the different offices and service areas, and therefore were unsustainable. We need a structured mentorship program so that every newly hired CSW and every DCFS office has the benefit of an experienced children's social worker mentor during their first year of service. Without structure and organization, a formal mentorship program cannot succeed. For this, we in the department, as well as the community and the children that we serve, need the support of the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you. Just want to remind the speakers that you're given 1 minute. So if you could hold to that, if you want to pass on your time to someone else, that's fine too. Thank you. Next speaker.
Good morning, supervisors. My name is Sharonda Wade. I am a supervising children's social worker in the ASFA section of the Torrance office. Let me get straight to the point. We have a foster care crisis in LA County. Last year I was an emergency response worker at the Compton office. I was asked questions when calling for foster homes such as what age is the child, what race is the child, what city is the child coming from, does the child have mental health issues, do they have learning disabilities, is the parents on drugs, do they have medical issues, and being told by different foster parents that they wouldn't take the child because the child was from Compton, or the child spoke Spanish, or the parents had mental health issues, or the parents were on drugs, or the child would be reunified with their parent. Even last week, I saw a child who was 12 years old. I remember this child because I had her when she was 6 years old, and she's now been in 22 foster care placements. I went home and I cried last week because I knew that this child would be lingering in the system for a long time. Please use your platform to help the foster care crisis. There's a supply and demand issue, and to ease the crisis, we must expand the supply of goods and loving homes.
So what that last video highlighted was the high turnover rate that the staff has when you're working in social services, and the lack of structure and education and assistance that's available to the social workers. Also, they talk about how difficult it is to get these kids even placed in homes and the questions that they ask before accepting a child. I will elaborate a little more on some of the difficulties that we had faced, which is that we are, of course, custodial guardians, so we're responsible and legally liable for all incidents with the clients while in our care. So when you're alone with 8 girls, you're responsible for each girl. The staff had it was a 6-month turnover rate, very fast turnover rate. I don't know any colleague that still works there. Also, our complaints were often ignored, and I had personally written a letter that stated, we're not therapists, we should be doing these things, I would like to do more life skills with them, outlining some of the practices that we could do better, and I was completely ignored. And also I highlighted some of the unsafe practices that we were supposed to engage in, and again, I was ignored. Also, many clients, or many workers are afraid of getting fired, for speaking the truth. Also for getting sued regarding confidentiality issues or charting. If you charted and then if you say it was your fault or something like that, you're not allowed to do that. If you file an incident report and you would say, for instance, that you were interacting with another client, and during that time, that's when another client got into a physical altercation, it's still your fault for not having eyes on that client. And so they would get mad at you for kind of confessing in your incident reports that you were not providing the utmost care. Also, some police would intentionally instigate girls. They just didn't understand where they were coming from, and or yell at them for self-harming. And some of these girls were definitely afraid of men, and they just didn't know how to handle them, or they would tackle them to the floor, and just unnecessary. But also some police were just really great also, and would just really want to help, but got frustrated when the girls weren't receptive to their help, or would get angry, and then they would never come back to help again. Also, again, when mentally stable children didn't have a place to go, and they would wind up in this group home and would get bullied and harassed, and all of a sudden have an incident report where before they had none. Also, yes, again, high amounts of police reports for minor infractions. So if they ran away, if they vandalized something, with a Sharpie, because it's state property, they would get charged. And they would have these insane long rap sheets for these silly things. The next video is quite empowering, by this lady discussing how even when neglect is reported, they still fail some of the children. And she just makes some really great points. Enjoy.
Please, ma'am. In the case of a 4-year-old boy, we had deep concerns for his safety because in spite of evidence presented by 6 mandated reporters, all expert in child sexual abuse, including 2 highly qualified nurses with findings of physical evidence of sodomy, a sheriff's detective, investigators from CPS, the boy's therapist, and county council, all with a collective minimum of 60 years of experience in their fields of expertise, all found this small child credible regarding the abuse he and his brother were forced by the courts to endure. What is more concerning is that in the face of the experience of the experts I mentioned, a minors counsel, a 730 evaluator, admittedly not expert in child sexual abuse, recommended that the child stay with the named, identified, substantiated abuser, and that the parent, the protective parent, be stripped of all her parental rights and be placed on monitored visitation. These cases are born of domestic violence, and courts forcing domestic violence victims into shared custody of children with their batterers. The children end up absorbing the abuse. We need to thank the LA Times for the recent article to our community. And in light of the leaked DCFS report of 570 children's deaths reported to DCFS in 18 months during the time period of June 2010 to December 2011, with unsubstantiated claims of abuse in Los Angeles alone, you could hear a pin drop in this city regarding this report, that we have 570 dead children on our hands. The entire country was stopped and paralyzed at the horrific deaths of 20 beautiful children taken by a shooter.
Ma'am,
okay,
your time has expired. Ma'am, your time has expired, and we do thank you for your testimony.
These children cry into the void. What say
I'm sorry. If you have additional testimony to give, we take it from the sheriff, and he'll distribute it accordingly.
To just give a conclusion now, I would like to state, children have the right to be protected from being hurt and mistreated physically or mentally. This is according to UNICEF Article 19. And we have failed to uphold this right within child welfare systems. And what's important that we do now is expose the systematic abuse that these children endure. This affects a high amount of children, and it's everywhere, and we need to start reporting on it because the mainstream media doesn't, so we need to. The infrastructure doesn't even exist right now to even take care of these kids. And what I would like to do is also motivate the social workers, come clear, come clean, expose the lack of support that is available, and what these kids endure. We need to wake up. I wish I could go in a time machine almost and wake up. Also, I would like to encourage anybody who had been in child services or in care to come forth with your testimonies. Even if it's just a YouTube video, just come forth. We need to start demanding justice. I would like to also encourage anybody, if you have the means and the heart, do foster care. It starts with the community to heal our youth. And if you have a safe home, what happens is it's the real, true, good people that are not taking in these kids, and we need to start doing that and taking these kids back from the government and putting them into loving homes. And that's the first way we can really heal our youth. Thank you, of course, very much to listening me rant and rave. I would like to again, encourage everybody to do more research into the subject and to come forth with your own testimonies. So thank you. Have a good afternoon.